What's cracking, everybody? You're back with Mr. Berger. Tonight we're going to be taking a look at HappyNoob's Hog Exenado Rocket deck. Now this is a nice spin on a really powerful Hog deck that is basically, one of those classic combos. You see the Executioner and the Tornado paired together all the time, but one of the first decks that really founded that combo and really turned it into the powerhouse that it is this Hog Exenado deck. And the traditional versions of this deck actually run Lightning, but I found this deck on CWA recently, and I definitely recommend going and checking out that version, that video right there, if you're looking for some more pro gameplay, because the guy HappyNoob who kind of coined this deck, is on that channel, and you'll be able to see his matches. But this is my version of it. This is me kind of taking a look at the deck and trying it out, giving it a run, and breaking it down, seeing how I can come up with some strategies and some kind of underlying tips behind it and sharing those with you. So I tried it out. I had a lot of fun with it. I have a lot of experience with Hog myself. I kind of main Hog on ladder, and I really like Exenado decks. They're just so strong. I like the Executioner. I've loved him since he came out. Really strong, powerful card. So it's kind of like I said, it's kind of like the classic Executioner Hog Tornado combo deck, but there's a few variations, one being Rocket, another being that you've got Goblins, but I'll break that down a little bit more as we get along here. So let's see. I think that's basically the only difference is that you got the Goblins in there. Normally I would run like more of a cycle card like Bats or even Skeletons, or maybe even like a Swarm card like Goblin Gang or something, but apparently HappyNoob here likes to run Goblins. And they're not too meta. They used to be pretty decent, but there's just a lot of replacements now, like things like Bats. That's what I run in my ladder deck, for example. And you know what I mean? So if you want to switch them out for something else, you totally can. If you'd rather run Lightning, it would work out. Or if you'd rather run like Poison or Fireball, it'll work out. Because I actually would recommend one of those two. Lightning's really good in Hog decks and in a lot of decks, and it's pretty solid right now, but it doesn't give you any sense of that splash synergy, and that's the next thing that I want to talk about here. If you'll notice, this particular version of this deck has so much splash synergy in it, and so that almost makes me feel like this deck, or this version of it, works even better than like the classic versions, because you got even more things in there that really capitalize on having that Tornado in there and having that kind of splash synergy all together, and kind of getting a bunch of cards that really go well with each other, with that kind of splash AoE concept in mind, right? So let's talk about that. It mostly focuses around the Tornado Executioner combo, but there's definitely some other things that we can take into account with it as well. So there's a lot of other cards that actually synergize with that Tornado and with that overall splash concept, and you'll actually see examples of that in this particular replay. I'm going up against a Golem deck, and naturally Hog decks and Hog Cycle decks and things like that don't fare too well against Golems decks and beatdown decks. So having this Executioner and Tornado and all of that in one deck proves to be really powerful, and this is a great example of just that. I mean, it's just interesting for me because you're taking the Hog Rider, and to me, when I think of Hog, I think of like Hog Cycle decks, and I kind of play like a Hog Cycle kind of Zap Bait style deck on ladder. But you're giving it this kind of powerhouse defensive combo with all that massive splash synergy. So this isn't really played like a Hog Cycle deck. I mean, look at that synergy right there. Look at that Executioner just shutting everything down, and then the Log finishing off the Wizard, and so on and so forth. This isn't really played like a Hog Cycle deck. It's more like a control deck. And again, I'll talk about that a little bit more in the future here. But let's talk about the other cards that work really well with splash synergy in here with that Tornado. So you've got, of course, the Executioner, but you've also got the Ice Spirit. So you can actually use the Tornado to pull everything in, and then the Ice Spirit shortly after or at about the same time. As long as he isn't taken out by any ranged units or spells or anything, he'll leap onto them, and he'll actually freeze all the units that are sucked into the Tornado, and that can be massive value because you're getting that one elixir cost Ice Spirit and that little bit of damage that he does, and you're spreading that damage into a whole bunch of different units, and you're also freezing them all for that half a second or second or whatever it is. I think it's like half a second now, right? You've also got the Log and the Rocket. Those are your two spells, and those things, I mean, 2 of your 3 spells. Those things naturally work really well with the Tornado. When you Tornado everything in, You pull it into your target area, on top of their tower or away from your tower, or just clumping them all up wherever you can, most ideally to destroy them with your executioner. You can send in a rocket on top of that or a log on top of it, and that'll provide a huge amount of extra DPS. A tornado plus a rocket will shut down just about anything, other than of course a heavy tank, like a golem or a giant. But as far as like any sort of like support or swarm or anything like that goes, tornado rocket, almost nothing's really going to live through that. So if they've got a massive push going with a whole bunch of units, even if they're relatively spread out, you can rocket and then you can pull them all in together right as the rocket's about to land with the tornado and just absolutely destroy them all at once. So you've also got the Valkyrie. Don't forget that the Valkyrie's splash damage unit. She plays the role of the mini tank in this deck, but she also has other particular roles or certain roles, and I'll talk about her again in a little bit. But just keep in mind that she has that synergy with the tornado as well. She cleaves every time that she attacks and does damage to everything around her. So if you pull everything in with a tornado on top of her, she'll be cleaving it all and be dealing damage to everything around her all at once. So you're trying to use that massive splash synergy to go for powerful elixir trades and positive elixir trades, and you're basically using it as like a power defense, because like I said, it can shut down just about anything. It gives you the chance to let them push and then just absolutely decimate their push, and in turn gain an elixir advantage because you spent less than them, because you've got the advantage of your tower, the support of your tower, and you've got that massive splash synergy and all of that. So once you've done that, that's when you actually want to go in for a counter push with your hog. So it's kind of like a battle ram control deck almost. You're kind of using the hog rider like that rather than being like a hog cycle deck. You're using the hog generally, once you've defended. And this is not a good example there. You can see I sent the hog in willy-nilly and he kind of just got, ganked by the goblin gang. I think he got one swing off there, so it wasn't a complete waste. But ideally what you want to be doing is defending and then going in for a counter push once you've gained advantage, with that massive splash synergy that you have in this deck. So as I mentioned, it's not too much of a cycle deck, it's more of a control deck, so just keep that in mind with the playstyle. Don't necessarily be going in for the hog every time that you can, and you're not always trying to cycle back to him as quick as you can and outcycle their win condition. Sometimes you can let him sit in your hand for a little while, and you can actually just, hang on to him and keep playing defense for a bit, and then go in for a massive counter push with the hog in front or in the middle or whatever you want. Alright, towards the end of the match, you have actually the opportunity to rocket cycle. Now, don't be a noob like me and waste it and, spend 6 elixir on the rocket and then lose because of that, because you then don't have that 6 elixir to defend their push. But if you have the opportunity to, get some value with the rocket and be able to hit their tower and also hit their support units all at once, then you can be cycling the rocket onto their tower once their tower is relatively low, because rocket does a huge chunk of damage. So if it's got like 800 health left or whatever, then 2 rockets will basically take it out. I believe that's correct at this level. So just keep that in mind. You can be rocket cycling to finish off your opponent's tower towards the end of the match, once the timer's getting really low, or once you're in sudden death. Alright, let's see, what else did I want to talk about? Otherwise, use the rocket with massive splash synergy, or, once you tornado them, or use it to take out things like, wizards once they're crossing onto the opponent's tower. It is a hog deck after all, so you can be sending the hogs in from time to time and chipping away at the tower like that. And if you have the opportunity to chip away at the tower for a decent value, getting something like a wizard or an executioner or something as well, then definitely be sending that rocket in and use that as a kind of pseudo win condition to chip away at your opponent's tower. Alright, let's see. Well, I want to talk about the Valkyrie deck next. But before we do that, let's go ahead and jump on into another replay here. Alright, this is against a kind of funky miner deck, kind of like a bait deck with wizard in it, as you can see. But we'll see how it goes here and how I'm able to shut it down with that splash synergy and go in for those counter pushes with the hog. So let's talk about that Valkyrie, like I was saying. So she's a huge powerhouse of a mini tank in this deck. She's just, as I mentioned in previous videos, she's been buffed a lot. She got nerfed finally for the first time, or only the first or second time or something like that, ever, because she just got buffed so hard. And then in the last set of balance changes, or 2 balance changes ago or something like that, I lose track now because they're so often now. But anyway, she got a buff again, so she attacks slightly faster. And that was the major thing that they nerfed her, was like a 1.4 up to 1.6 second attack speed. Can't remember if it's all attacks or the initial attack, but anyway, it got brought back down to a 1.5 in this last patch, or in a previous patch, a recent one. So she's pretty decent. She's really beefy. That's another thing that they buffed in other recent ones. Not too recent balance changes, but previous ones, you know, a little further back. They gave her a bigger health pool. So she plays that kind of role of the mini tank and hog deck really well. Because you'll notice in almost every hog deck you've got like a knight or an ice golem, or in this case a Valkyrie, some sort of a mini tank, right? On rare occasion maybe a bandit or a royal ghost, but usually one of those, right? So in this case it's the Valkyrie. So she works out really well because she's so beefy. She's got high DPS. She's got AoE damage as well. So she plays the role of the mini tank. She also plays the role of a swarm clearer, so she can take out skeleton armies and goblin gangs, and you know, even like rascals and barbarians and things like that really well. So just keep that in mind. She's got multiple roles, and again, that gives her huge splash synergy with things like the tornado. She cleaves, so when you tornado everything in together for your executioner to cleave it, you can plop the Valkyrie down right on top of it as well, or use the Valkyrie first and then tornado everything into the Valkyrie, and then let the executioner and the Valkyrie just go to town and just absolutely wreck all of whatever they have going for a push. Alright, let's talk about the executioner next. I've talked about him a lot already, so I'll just kind of skim over him briefly. You know, he has a massive damage output for a few reasons. It's mostly his splash potential. He has the potential to, you know what I mean, like if he hits a lot of units, he has huge damage output potential. Because he's got such a large radius and it's easy for you to hit multiple units with him, especially with that tornado, then he has, you know, the potential to just deal an insane amount of DPS. So he works out great as a swarm clearer, but he also has decent single target DPS. So he plays the role of that range support card, kind of like a musketeer in the 2.6 Hog Cycle deck, but a little bit heavier, and he has still pretty decent, you know, single target damage. Alright guys, this is against a really funky deck. It's like a royal giant Sparky deck, but hey, whatever works for him, right? Or doesn't work in this case. Anyway, let's go ahead and keep talking about this deck here. So the Executioner, not only does he have huge AoE damage and pretty decent single target damage, but he's really beefy. He does cost 5 elixir, so he's a little bit more, but 5 elixir isn't too much, honestly. You know, in compared to like, say, a I don't know, musketeer is 4, right? It's not a whole lot more, right? It's only 1 more. You know, archers are 3, so it's pretty significant compared to like archers or something, but it's not too bad considering that he's really tanky. He's really beefy. A little bit late on that tornado there, I remember. But anyway, he doesn't die to lightning unless I'm mistaken. He does die to rocket. So if they're sitting in a rocket to chip away at your tower and get your executioner, do watch out for that. Don't fall for it every time and keep cycling him in the back. And I've done that, you know, a few times before. We've all made silly mistakes like that, right? So if you see that they're rocketing him all the time, find another place to place him. You know, cycle him a little bit further up. Don't be putting him in the back all the time. Because he does die to rocket, again, but does not die to lightning. And this is taking into account that everything's equal level, or that their spells and stuff are lower level than your executioner. Of course, if they're higher level, the interactions are going to change. Now, let's talk about those goblins. I've got mixed feelings about the goblins. You know, there's a lot of cards that you can put in hog decks and cycle decks, and this is reminiscent of a cycle deck because you have the cheap cards in there, like the log. You've got the goblins. Both of those are only 2 elixir cost. The tornado is only 3 elixir cost. And then, of course, you got the Ice Spirit, the classic cycle card at only 1 elixir. So, I don't know. I don't know why you have the goblins in there. Like, personally, I would put bats in there, or maybe even skeletons. Like I said, I think I mentioned this earlier, or even like a goblin gang. But this is what HappyNoob like to do. So, you know, I took his word for it, and I decided that I would try his particular version of the deck. And, you know, they're pretty cool. They do live through like Zap and stuff. Not that Zap's super meta right now. Honestly, it's Barbarian Barrel mostly that you have to worry about. But anyway, the goblins are pretty decent. They do have really solid damage output, so they're pretty decent for just that kind of cheap, kind of pseudo cycle card, and something that, you know, can chip away and do a little bit of extra damage. And, you know, again, if they live, they actually have really solid damage output, and they can always, you know, distract things like P.E.K.K.A.s and regular princes, any single target targeting enemy unit, right? So let's see, that's kind of why the goblins are in there. But again, if you want to sub them out for something else, be my guest, go right ahead. Alright guys, so for opening moves, again, be careful if they have like rocket or something, or lightning, and they're constantly able to take out whatever you're putting out in the back. So I like to put things in the back as an opening move, so you'll often see me putting things like the Executioner, maybe even like the Goblins or the Valkyrie kind of cycle behind the King Tower. So just be wary of whatever their spells are and, you know, answer accordingly. You can also hang tight, let them make the opening move. This is a decent deck for that because it is a bit of a control deck. So it's up to you if you want to do that. But for me, I like to cycle cards in the back. You can actually afford to open with a Hog or an Ice Spirit at the bridge, or maybe even both. Just don't waste too much elixir on that initial push, because then you'll basically give them a huge opportunity to go in for a huge counter push and be able to, you know, take advantage of that wasted elixir and just destroy one of your towers with ease. Alright, so that's basically it for opening moves. Let's skim through card replacements real quick. So, oh, look at that rocket to finish it up there. Alright, let's go ahead and jump on into one more replay, and then I'll talk about card replacements in that one, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up this video. Now I remember this one. This was actually a good match until he gave up, so do keep in mind he gives me a good run for my money, but after I think I take one down, one tower down, then he pretty much gives up. But it'll be something good for us to watch while we talk about card replacements briefly here. Alright, so let's see. For the Ice Spirit, you can always do another cheap cycle card. You could do Fire Spirits. You could always do maybe Heal, even if you want to do something real cheap like that. But classically, you would use an Ice Spirit. Ice Spirit does have that splash synergy, so maybe Fire Spirits would be a decent replacement. I talked about replacements for regular goblins. You could do another, you know, cheap cycle card like Spear Goblins or Bats, or regular skeletons, or go a little bit more expensive with like a skeleton army or a Goblin Gang. For the Hog Rider, excuse me, you could go for like a Battle Ram, another win condition, maybe even like a Skeleton Barrel if you wanted. Something that can, you know, apply pressure for a big counter push. If you wanted to go for another different style of win condition like a Giant, honestly I think that would work out pretty well if you did like a Giant, or maybe even like a Golem or something in this deck. If you wanted to try a Ram Rider, that would probably work out pretty well. Just any sort of, you know, aggressive win condition like that. For the Valkyrie, I would go for another mini tank, maybe like an Ice Golem or a Knight. If you wanted to keep in the theme of that splash damage, you could go for like a Dark Prince. That would be a pretty decent replacement. Maybe even like a Royal Ghost would be a good replacement for the Valkyrie. For the Rocket, I mentioned this I think, but you could go Lightning, and if you don't want to go Lightning and you want to go for more splash energy because you got that whole theme going on and you got the Tornado, you could go for a medium spell instead, like a Fireball or a Poison. I wouldn't go for another light spell because you've already got the Tornado and the Log. I would probably go for like one of the medium spells, or maybe even go classic version of this and go Lightning. Can't really place that Tornado, or replace it, excuse me, because that's kind of what this deck is built around. If you absolutely must, maybe like a Tombstone or like a Tesla, some sort of defensive structure, but I would not recommend replacing it in this deck by any means. If you're not gonna put the Tornado in this deck, you should probably play a different version. Maybe just play like the classic 2.6 Hog Cycle or something like that. For the Executioner, there's actually a lot of solid replacements. Go-to replacement for the Executioner would be the Wizard. If you're playing this on ladder, and you have the Wizard over-leveled, or you have the opportunity to request him a lot and you can over-level him, then he's a really solid card, really great with these splash energy decks. So he's a huge, awesome replacement for the Executioner. You could also go for something like a Baby Dragon, maybe even an Ice Wizard, maybe even a Bowler. Notice it's all these things I'm saying that A, have splash damage, you know, and synergize with that Tornado, and B, have a relatively similar elixir cost. The Ice Wizard's going a lot cheaper, but the other ones are relatively similar. If you're going to replace the Log, just go for another light spell. Barbarian Barrel is huge right now. Zap is awesome in Hog decks because you can use it when your Hog's on the tower and they put down like a skeleton army or a goblin gang or something to defend against it. Or you can always go a little bit, you know, off meta and go like a giant snowball or something like that. Alright guys, that is it for tonight's video. Make sure to leave this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and leave a comment in the comment section below if you have any questions, or if you want to see me feature any decks, or if you just want to say, hey, what's cracking, Mr. Berger. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and have a good night.